Good evening, and thank you for slipping into Sleepy Kitchen with me. Tonight, we're talking about the potato, a kitchen staple that can seem simple until you notice how many different jobs it can do. It shows up in diner breakfasts, weeknight trays, picnic salads, and holiday sides, and it rarely demands attention the way a steak or a bright berry does. Because it is so familiar, the useful facts are easy to miss, especially the small details that explain why one potato turns fluffy while another stays neat and firm. This episode is a slow, steady way of noticing those details, one calm step at a time. Potatoes are unusually adaptable because their mild flavor and built-in starch let them shift texture with heat. With one ingredient, you can land on creamy mash, crisp fries, fluffy baked centers, or hearty chunks that stay intact in soups and stews. What changes is how much structure the potato keeps and how much it softens as it cooks. So different methods can feel like different foods. If this helps you unwind, consider subscribing for more quiet kitchen journeys like this one, with long, useful fact episodes. There's nothing to keep up with here. Just listen at an easy pace and let each small fact lean into the next. If your mind wanders, it can wander, and the thread of information will still be here when it comes back. Unlike carrots or turnips, a potato is not a true root. It is an underground stem called a tuber. A tuber is the plant's storage piece, built to hold water and starch, while roots mainly exist to absorb water and nutrients. So what is simple? When you hold a potato, you're holding stored fuel, and that fuel is what cooks into tenderness and fullness once heat unlocks it. Because it is a storage stem, the potato comes from a plant family with clear boundaries between what is food and what is not. Despite looking nothing like a tomato in the produce aisle, the potato belongs to the same broad plant family as tomatoes and eggplants. This group is often called the nightshade family, and it includes many everyday foods alongside plants that are not meant to be eaten at all. The practical point is clarity. The potato plant has parts that are food and parts that are not, and the family connection makes those boundaries easier to remember. With that in mind, a simple fact about what the plant can make above ground becomes easier to avoid. The potato plant can form small green fruits above the ground that are not food. These fruits can resemble tiny tomatoes, and they contain natural toxins that can cause unpleasant symptoms if eaten. The everyday rule is short and sturdy. The tuber is the edible part, and the little berry-like fruit is something to leave alone, even if it looks harmless. That same protective chemistry can show up in a more common, more practical way on the tuber itself when light gets involved. Not every mark on a potato matters, but green patches are the one visible warning worth respecting. When a potato is exposed to light, the skin can turn green, and protective compounds near the surface can increase, including glycoalkaloids such as solanine, which are bitter and can be irritating in larger amounts. You don't need exact numbers to act responsibly. If you see green, trim it away with a generous margin, removing a thicker layer rather than a thin shave, and skip potatoes that are heavily green or taste noticeably bitter. This is one reason cool and dark became the oldest storage rule, and it also points back to the places where people first learned to keep potatoes safely between harvests. Historians often trace the earliest cultivated potatoes to the Andes Mountains of South America, especially regions that include parts of modern Peru and Bolivia. In high-altitude areas with sharp weather changes, an underground tuber is a practical advantage because it is sheltered in the soil and can be harvested and carried when needed. Evidence indicates people were selecting and tending potatoes there thousands of years ago, turning a wild plant into a dependable food and building knowledge that lasted across generations. That long partnership helps explain why the potato has so many forms today, and why variety matters as much as the word potato suggests. Although many American stores offer only a handful of familiar options, indigenous farmers in parts of Peru and Bolivia cultivated and protected hundreds of potato varieties long before European contact. The reason was practical. Different potatoes can suit different soils, elevations, and storage needs, and they can also cook up with different textures, from firm and sliceable to soft and fluffy. Put simply, potatoes became a toolkit rather than a single ingredient, with choices that could match a field, a season, or a dish. Those choices eventually traveled far beyond the Andes as potatoes moved into new parts of the world and began to be replanted in unfamiliar climates. Most accounts place potatoes arriving in Europe in the 16th century, carried along Spanish routes, and then spreading through trade, gardens, and small farms. Potatoes also travel well as planting material because they can be replanted from pieces of tuber, so a sack of potatoes can become a new crop when the weather allows. Once established, a planting can produce several new tubers over a season, which help the crop expand quickly in places where it grew well, especially in cooler regions that suited the plant. Even so, a crop can move quickly and still take time to earn trust at the table. Despite their usefulness, potatoes were not instantly welcomed everywhere in Europe, and the hesitation had several layers. Some people mistrusted foods that grow underground. Others worried about the plant's relationship to nightshades, and unfamiliar crops often collide with older ideas about what a proper staple should look like. Over time, daily needs tended to outweigh suspicion, and potatoes shifted from curiosity to common food in many regions as people learned which parts to eat and how to store them safely through cold seasons. Once accepted, their appeal came from how little they demand before they become dinner, which leads to a simple, practical fact about processing. Unlike grains that often require milling or long preparation, before they feel like food, potatoes can become satisfying with very little processing. Their stored starch provides structure and thickness on its own, which is why boiling, baking, roasting, and frying can all work without extra ingredients just to make the potato hold together. The simple consequence is practical. Potatoes fit into many routines because they are forgiving, and they can carry other flavors without demanding much attention in return, whether they are a side dish or the base of a bowl. From here, it helps to look at what's inside a potato and what quiet changes happen while it waits in storage, because those details explain many everyday outcomes. A medium potato can provide a noticeable share of your daily vitamin C, even though it looks like a plain starchy food. The exact amount depends on the potato's size and how it is cooked, but it often lands in the tens of milligrams, which can be a meaningful slice of a day's typical target. Vitamin C supports everyday maintenance, including collagen building, and it tends to drift downward as produce sits in storage. It is also water-soluble, which means it can move. Some of it can dissolve into cooking liquid, and some of it can break down with heat over time. That is why long simmering in lots of water, especially after cutting potatoes small, usually reduces more of it. Methods that use little water, like baking or microwaving, often keep more of that vitamin close to where it started. I keep a simple rule in mind. Less water contact and shorter cooking tends to retain more, even when the exact number shifts. That same "where does it go" question becomes even clearer when you think about minerals, starting with potassium. Potatoes are a meaningful source of potassium, a mineral your body uses to help manage fluid balance and support normal muscle and nerve signaling. In many cases, a medium potato can match or even exceed the potassium in a medium banana, though the exact amount depends on variety and size. Potassium is comfortable in water, so boiling can move some of it into the cooking liquid instead of keeping it entirely in the potato. What happens next depends on what you do with that liquid. If the water becomes part of a soup or stew, the mineral stays in the meal. If the water is poured out, it leaves with it. Cutting potatoes into smaller pieces can increase that movement, simply because more surface area is touching the water. By contrast, methods like baking and microwaving tend to keep more of the mineral in the potato because there is no cooking water to discard. It is a quiet reminder that nutrition can depend on what you keep and what you throw away. And the next useful nutrient detail sits right at the surface, in the skin and the layer beneath it. The skin and the thin layer right beneath it hold a good portion of a potato's fiber and several micronutrients. For scale, a medium potato with its skin can provide a few grams of fiber, which can help a meal feel steadier and more filling without changing the potato's basic flavor. Fiber does not melt away with heat the way some vitamins can, but it can be removed if a potato is peeled deeply, because much of it is concentrated in those outer layers. A very thin peel still leaves much of that near skin layer behind, while a thick peel removes more of it than most people realize. The skin also acts like a built-in wrapper. It helps a potato stay intact as the inside softens, which is one reason skin on potatoes often keep a cleaner shape. Once the surface is on your radar, it helps to remember what the potato is made of most of all, because it drives nearly every texture change: water. A potato is mostly water by weight, often close to about 80%. That is why a raw potato can feel heavy and cool in your hand. Water carries heat inward gently, helping the center cook without scorching. But that same water also has to get out of the way for the outside to turn crisp and browned. This is why crisp potatoes are partly a drying story. Less surface moisture means less steaming, and more room for browning to begin. Steam is wonderful for tenderness, but it is also the main reason a crowded pan stays pale and soft at the edges. Even a very hot oven struggles to brown a surface that stays wet, because browning waits for the surface to dry. When potatoes seem watery, it is usually moisture lingering in the wrong place at the wrong time. Once that moisture story makes sense, the solid part of the potato becomes the next focus, because those solids are what thicken and set the final texture. Most of the potato's dry matter is starch, stored in tiny granules inside the potato's cells. As the potato heats, those granules absorb water and swell. That swelling is what turns a firm raw bite into a tender, breakable one. You may hear this described as starch gelatinizing, and I treat that as a plain phrase, meaning the starch takes in water and becomes soft and thick instead of hard and chalky. If the cells stay mostly intact, the potato holds a clean shape. If the cells separate easily, the potato turns fluffy and starts to fall apart. A steady, gentle cook encourages more even swelling through the piece. Vigorous boiling and rough handling can break softened edges sooner, especially once the potato is close to tender. That is why two batches can behave differently, even when they reach a similar doneness. It is still the same starch doing its job, but the way the pieces are treated matters. And the next detail is that potato starch is not one single uniform thing. Potato starch is mostly built from two kinds of molecules, often called amylose and amylopectin. In plain terms, amylose tends to set a bit more firmly as it cooks. Amylopectin leans toward a softer, more cohesive, slightly clingy texture. Different potato types carry different balances of these two starches, which is one reason some potatoes seem eager to turn fluffy, while others prefer to stay smooth and together. This is also why the everyday labels starchy and waxy are so useful. They are shorthand for how the potato's starch behaves in the pot or oven. The names can be forgettable, but the outcome is practical. It helps you predict whether a potato will hold its shape or drift toward creaminess once the starch has softened. After starch, the next nutritional note is smaller, but still worth knowing, because it helps explain why potatoes have carried people through hard seasons. Potatoes do contain protein, but the total amount is modest compared with foods like beans, meat, or dairy. The useful twist is that potato protein includes all the essential amino acids. In other words, it contains the full set your body cannot make by itself, even if the overall quantity is not large. That is part of why potatoes have helped support large populations as a dependable staple, especially when they are paired with other foods that bring more protein and fat. In a single serving, the protein may look small. Across a large portion, it becomes a real contribution rather than a rounding error. It does not turn a potato into a high-protein food, but it does make the potato more than just starch. And once protein is mentioned, it becomes clear what potatoes are not bringing on their own: fat. Plain potatoes contain virtually no fat, so most of the richness in a potato dish comes from what gets added during cooking. Oil for roasting, butter for mashing, cheese for topping, or frying in hot fat can all turn the same base ingredient into very different meals. The practical consequence is control. You can keep potatoes light and straightforward, or you can make them deeply hearty, and the difference is mostly the method and the extras. Fat also changes how flavors register, because many aromas dissolve better in fat than in water, which is part of why dressed potatoes taste fuller than plain ones. In frying, fat does double duty. It adds richness while also helping drive off surface moisture so crispness can form. This is one reason two dishes that both start with potatoes can end up with very different calorie density and mouthfeel. Fat is usually an add-on, and salt works in a similar way because the potato itself starts with very little sodium. A plain potato is naturally very low in sodium, so most of the salt in potato dishes comes from the cooking water, the seasonings, and the toppings you choose. This is why salting boiling water can make a potato taste seasoned all the way through. As the potato cooks, it absorbs hot water, and dissolved salt can travel along with that water into the outer layers and beyond. For contrast, a potato boiled in unsalted water often tastes flat, even if you salt it afterward, while a potato cooked in well-salted water tends to taste evenly seasoned with less salt sprinkled at the end. This is also why packaged potato foods can be far saltier than potatoes cooked at home, even when the first ingredient on the label is still simply potatoes. Even without added salt, potatoes still taste of themselves, but salt sharpens their gentle sweetness and makes the texture feel more complete. A little salt tends to highlight. A lot of salt can drown out the quiet potato flavor you were trying to keep. When I separate what the potato brings from what I add, potatoes become easier to predict and easier to adjust. With vitamin C, potassium, fiber, water, and starch in mind, the next step is learning which potatoes naturally lean toward which textures in everyday cooking. Thousands of potato varieties exist worldwide, even though most American grocery stores focus on a small, familiar set. In the Andes alone, farmers have maintained an enormous range of shapes, colors, and textures, and modern breeders continue to develop new types for different climates and markets. The practical point is simple. Potato is not one ingredient with one behavior. It is a whole category of tubers that cook differently. To keep it beginner-friendly, it helps to sort potatoes into 3 kitchen groups based on what they do when heat hits them: starchy, waxy, and in-between all-purpose potatoes. Once you learn that basic map, choosing a potato starts to feel less like guessing and more like matching. Starchy potatoes have a drier interior and tend to break apart more easily as they cook. If you cut one open after baking, the center often looks fluffy and slightly crumbly. That is the texture many people want for baked potatoes and classic mashed potatoes, where you want the inside to fall into soft flakes instead of staying in neat slices. One plain reason is moisture. Starchy potatoes usually have more dry matter and less water, so there is less internal moisture holding the cells together once heat softens them. In everyday terms, they behave like something that wants to puff and separate rather than stay smooth and unified. When you stir a pot of starchy potatoes, they are more likely to shed little edges and turn the surface cloudy with starch, because their structure relaxes faster. That same dryness also helps explain why starchy potatoes often turn crisp more readily in the oven or fryer. When there is less internal water, there is often less steam being pushed out toward the surface. That makes it a little easier for the surface to dry, and once the surface dries, browning and crisping can begin. You still have to manage the basics: heat, oil, and space in the pan, but the potato itself is cooperating. If you want browned edges and a soft, fluffy center, starchy potatoes are usually the simplest starting point. Once you have that group in mind, it helps to name the most common example, because it shows up everywhere. Russet potatoes are the most common starchy potato in many American kitchens. They are often large and oblong, with a rough, netted brown skin that looks a little rugged compared with smoother varieties. Their popularity shows up in a quiet way. Many recipes assume russets when they say baked potato or French fries without specifying a type, because russets are the standard in so many stores and diners. In cooking, russets tend to bake up with a fluffy interior. They can also fry into fries with a tender center and a crisp shell when the heat and timing are right. Because they are on the drier side, they take on butter, sour cream, or gravy without making the whole dish feel watery. In a simple sense, they act like a sturdy base that absorbs richness without losing their shape all at once. Waxy potatoes sit on the other end of the everyday spectrum. Waxy potatoes hold their shape well and stay cohesive when cooked. Instead of separating into fluffy flakes, they tend to keep clean slices and intact cubes. Their interior often feels moister and creamier, and the texture can seem almost silky rather than crumbly. The reason is not mysterious. As waxy potatoes cook, their cells tend to hold together more tightly, so the piece stays intact even when it is stirred or tossed. A simple example is potato salad. In a potato salad, you usually want pieces that stay distinct, so each bite still feels like separate potatoes rather than one soft mash. Once you notice that shape-holding trait, waxy potatoes become an easy default for boiling and for any dish where you plan to stir, toss, or dress the potatoes after they cook. Red potatoes and fingerlings are classic examples of waxy potatoes. Red potatoes are usually round to oval with thin red skins. Fingerlings are small and narrow, shaped a bit like thick fingers, and they can come in tan, red, or mixed skins. Their size is part of their charm. Fingerlings are often served whole or halved because they already match a bite, which makes them feel naturally suited to roasting trays, sheet pan dinners, and warm salads. These potatoes tend to cook up dense and creamy, staying tidy even when handled. Their thin skins are also commonly left on because the skins soften nicely and add just a little extra structure. That small amount of structure matters. It is part of what helps a salad stay composed instead of turning cloudy and starchy when you stir in dressing. Between starchy and waxy, you have the middle group, all-purpose potatoes. All-purpose potatoes sit between the two extremes, and they are often the best choice when you want one bag to cover several meals. They usually have a medium level of starch and moisture, which gives them a broad range of polite behavior in the kitchen. They can roast well. They can mash without becoming as gluey as very waxy potatoes might, especially if you handle them gently. They can also behave well in soups and stews, holding their shape better than a very starchy potato while still softening enough to feel tender. The everyday benefit is flexibility. You are not getting a potato that is perfect for one single job. You are getting a potato that is reliably good for many jobs, which is often what a busy home kitchen needs most. Yukon Gold potatoes are a popular all-purpose choice in the United States. They have a yellow interior and a thinner skin than russets, and they often cook up with a naturally creamy texture. Many people describe their flavor as a little richer or more buttery than a plain white potato, even before adding butter. That makes them especially good for mashing and roasting because the potato brings a little built-in richness to the finished dish. Because they land in the middle on starch and moisture, Yukon Golds can make mashed potatoes that feel smooth and flavorful without sliding toward gluey as quickly as very waxy potatoes might. At the same time, they often hold their shape better than russets in soups and stews, which is why they are a common one-potato-does-it-all option. Once you start noticing the inside color of potatoes, it is also worth knowing that some potatoes are dramatically colored for a real chemical reason, not a dye or a trick. Purple and blue potatoes get much of their color from anthocyanins, the same family of pigments that color foods like blueberries and red cabbage. In kitchen terms, these pigments are water-soluble. That means some color can bleed into cooking water, especially when the potato is cut small or boiled. The color you see raw can also shift when cooked. Sometimes it turns deeper. Sometimes it dulls slightly. Heat can change pigments, and acidity can shift how the color shows up, which is why a purple potato can look a little different depending on the dish. The most practical point for home cooking is visual. Purple and blue potatoes can turn a familiar method into a plate that looks new, even if you cook them the same way you cook a yellow or red potato. They are not a completely different category of food in a simple, dramatic sense. The main difference most people notice first is the color, and the color is real and comes from those pigments. New potatoes add one more useful layer to this map, because new is about timing, not about a separate variety. New potatoes are simply young potatoes harvested early. Because they are taken before the skins have fully thickened, their skins are thin and delicate. That thin skin is why they often look smooth and feel tender, and it is also why they do not always need peeling. Their early harvest also tends to give them a naturally moist, waxy-like texture, even if the same variety could behave differently when fully mature. For scale, new potatoes are often small enough to cook whole, and that size helps them stay tender and keeps them from drying out. In practice, they are easy to love in simple preparations: quick boils, gentle roasting, warm salads, and butter and herb sides where the potato's own texture is the point. New potatoes do have one clear limitation, and it is practical rather than dramatic. Their shelf life is shorter. That thinner skin offers less protection, so they can lose moisture faster and show age sooner than thicker-skinned potatoes. They are a good reminder that potatoes are living foods, not just shelf-stable objects. When the skin is thin, the clock moves a little faster. That is why a bag of new potatoes often rewards you when you cook it sooner rather than later. And it is also why the next set of facts matters. Once you know which potatoes tend to turn fluffy, which tend to stay neat, and which sit in the middle, the next everyday skill is choosing them well at the store and storing them in a way that keeps them firm, calm, and ready for the job you picked. A good potato starts with its feel, because firmness is a fast clue that the inside is still intact. In the store, I look for potatoes that are hard all the way through. I avoid anything with soft spots, wet patches, or deep cuts, because a soft area usually means the cells have begun to break down. That breakdown can spread. Even a small soft spot can grow into a larger one over a week or two, especially if the potato is kept warm or sealed up with no airflow. Firmness is the quickest first check, and once a potato passes it, the next sign of age is what's happening at the eyes. Small sprouts or tiny points at the eyes are normal. A potato is a living storage piece, and those eyes are where new growth begins. Long sprouts, though, usually mean the potato has been sitting long enough to wake up and start spending its stored energy. A short nub can often be trimmed away with little waste. Thicker sprouts can come with a softer interior because the potato has already used some of its starch and moisture to grow. There is also a simple, practical threshold you can see without thinking too hard about it. If the sprouts are long enough to tangle with each other in the bag, that potato is usually past its peak for clean slices and crisp edges. After sprouts, the next quick check is weight, because weight hints at how much water the potato has managed to hold on to. A potato that feels heavy for its size is usually one that still has good moisture inside. If two potatoes look similar, but one feels noticeably lighter, the lighter one is often dehydrated. You may also see wrinkling or a slightly rubbery skin, which is another quiet sign that water has been slowly leaving. Moisture loss matters in ordinary cooking. A drier potato can bake up mealy, and it can roast unevenly, with edges that seem ready before the center feels right. A well-hydrated potato tends to cook more predictably because the water inside carries heat inward and supports a more even softening. Weight is a before you cook clue. And it leads naturally to the bigger question. How do you keep that moisture where you want it once the potatoes come home? Cool, dark, and dry storage is the classic rule because it slows both sprouting and spoilage without damaging texture. Cool here means cool, but not refrigerator cold. Many sources point to a cellar-like range, roughly around 45 to 55 degrees F, or about 7 to 13 degrees C, as a useful ballpark. The exact number matters less than the direction. Cooler slows the clock, while warmth speeds it up. Airflow matters too, because it helps prevent moisture from collecting on the skins. In simple terms, you want the potatoes resting, not sweating. You also want them protected from light, because light is a signal that can push a potato toward change. Once that baseline is set, it helps to know what can shift when storage gets too cold. Refrigeration can change potato flavor and browning because cold conditions encourage some starch to convert into sugar. The everyday result is simple to notice. A potato stored in the fridge may taste a little sweeter. It can also brown faster and darker when fried or roasted, sometimes before the inside has fully turned tender. That does not automatically make refrigerated potatoes unsafe on its own, but it can make fries and hash browns look overly dark. In some cases, that extra browning can tilt flavor toward bitter if sugars brown too aggressively. If you are aiming for pale, evenly browned fries or a gentle golden hash brown, room-cool storage is often the simpler path. After temperature, the next big storage pressure is light, because light changes the surface in a different way than cold does. Light exposure during storage can cause potatoes to develop green areas more quickly, so it's worth checking for a green tint before you buy and again before you cook. Under bright store lighting, potatoes near the top of a bin are more likely to show that green cast. Potatoes pressed against clear packaging can do it too, because the light stays close to the skin for long stretches of time. The practical habit is to choose potatoes that look evenly colored and to store them at home in a way that blocks light rather than letting them sit on an open counter. Even if the rest of the potato looks fine, a green area is a useful warning to respect, and it is easier to prevent than to fix later. Light is one pressure on a potato's resting state, and another is what it is stored beside, especially when other produce is involved. Storing potatoes close to onions can shorten their shelf life, and many sources suggest keeping them apart. Both are living plant foods. As they sit, they release moisture and natural gases. In a tight, closed space, that combination can create conditions that encourage sprouting or softening sooner. The change can be small, but noticeable. A bag of potatoes that might stay firm for weeks can begin sprouting earlier when it is packed closely with onions in a closed cabinet. Separating them is a low-effort way to slow that clock. It also makes it easier to keep each one in the kind of environment it prefers. That naturally leads to the next practical question. What kind of container helps potatoes last? Paper bags and ventilated containers help potatoes last longer because they allow airflow and reduce trapped moisture. A sealed plastic bag can hold condensation, especially if the potatoes were a little damp when they went in, or if the storage spot warms and cools across the day. That trapped dampness makes soft spots and mold more likely, particularly if one potato in the bag is already nicked or bruised. Ventilation does not need to be fancy. A paper bag folded loosely, a basket, or any container with airflow can work. as long as it keeps the potatoes out of direct light. The goal is simple. Avoid a wet microclimate around the skins, and avoid bright light that encourages surface changes. Once storage is stable, the next practical moment is when a potato is cut, because cut surfaces behave differently than intact skins. Cut potatoes brown quickly because the exposed flesh reacts with oxygen. This is the same basic idea you see when an apple slice darkens, and potatoes can show it fast. For scale, you can often see color change within minutes on a freshly cut surface, especially on thinner slices with lots of exposed area. For short-term storage, it helps to keep cut pieces submerged in water. Water limits oxygen contact, which helps the pieces stay pale. It also keeps the surface from drying out, which supports more even cooking later, especially in dishes where you want a smooth, steady softening instead of dried edges that cook differently. This is a temporary hold rather than a long-term solution. It is a way to buy time while you prep the rest of a meal, not a method for storing potatoes for days. If you are holding cut potatoes for a little while, the same basic logic applies. Cooler conditions slow change. A bowl of water kept cool will usually keep the pieces looking fresher than a bowl left warm on the counter. But the key point is still the same. The water is there to reduce oxygen contact and to prevent the surface from drying out while you work. When you are ready to cook, you can drain and move on to the next step, where those cut surfaces become part of the texture story. The choices you made when buying and storing potatoes show up here too. A firm potato tends to stay cleaner at the edges when you cut it. A tired, dehydrated potato tends to shed and smear more easily. In a quiet way, the whole process connects. What matters most is that these checks are quick and forgiving. You do not need to measure anything. You are simply looking for a potato that feels solid, shows only modest sprouting, and still carries its weight. You are giving it a home that is cool, dark, and dry enough to keep it resting. You are protecting it from light, and you are keeping it away from companions that can speed up its aging in a closed space. Then, when you cut it, you treat the exposed flesh like something that reacts quickly to air, and you use water as a short pause button. With that foundation, the next facts can move into what the potato contains and how those inner details affect nutrition and safety in everyday cooking, because the same simple habits keep showing up in new places. Scrubbing potatoes under running water is usually enough to clean them for cooking, even when you plan to keep the skin on. Most of what you are removing is clinging soil, surface grit, and the dusty residue that settles into tiny pores and shallow cracks. It is not the kind of job that needs soap, and it is rarely improved by long soaking, because the dirt you care about is sitting on the outside, not hiding deep inside the flesh. A vegetable brush helps, especially on rougher skins, but your fingers can do the same work if you go slowly and cover the whole surface. I pay extra attention to the eyes and small dimples, because those are the places that hold on to dirt most stubbornly. Clean skins matter most when the skin will be eaten and when the potatoes will be roasted, because grit can hang on through dry heat cooking and show up as a sandy bite. Once the outside is clean, the next decision is whether to peel at all, because that choice changes both texture and nutrition. Peeling potatoes removes the skin, and it also removes some nutrients that concentrate near the surface. The skin and the thin layer right beneath it hold a good portion of the fiber, and peeling also trims away a ring where certain minerals and micronutrients tend to sit a little closer to the outside than the center. The trade-off is practical and visible. Peeled potatoes can look smoother and more uniform, which matters in dishes where you want a very clean color and a consistent, pale texture. Skin on potatoes can taste slightly earthier, and they often hold together a little better because the skin acts like a gentle wrapper while the interior softens. If a recipe is aiming for a perfectly smooth mash or a refined puree, peeling can make sense. If you want structure, a more rustic look, and less waste, leaving the skin on is often the simpler choice. That choice becomes easier when you know how you will peel, because the tool you use decides how much potato you lose. A vegetable peeler wastes less potato than a knife because it takes off a thin, controlled layer. A knife peel often removes several millimeters at once, especially if you are trying to move quickly or the potato has uneven bumps that make the blade skip. Over a few potatoes, that thickness adds up into a surprising amount of lost flesh. And the loss is even more noticeable with smaller potatoes, where the peel thickness becomes a larger fraction of the total. A peeler follows curves more easily, so you can remove skin while keeping more usable potato beneath it. It also makes it easier to shave away small blemishes without turning a tiny spot into a large, flattened area. The practical result is efficiency. You get more servings from the same bag, and you expose less fresh surface area that can begin to brown while you are still working. Once peeling is settled, the biggest texture lever in potato cooking is what you do with the knife next. Cutting potatoes into evenly sized pieces helps them cook at the same rate, so the whole batch reaches tenderness together. A 1-inch cube and a 2-inch cube behave like different foods in the pot because the larger piece needs more time for heat to reach the center. In everyday terms, the outside of a big piece can turn very soft, while the middle still feels firm, and that difference invites broken edges when you stir or drain. Those broken edges then release more starch, which can thicken the cooking water and make the final texture feel uneven. Even cuts are a quiet form of control, and they matter whether you are boiling, roasting, or frying. They also make timing easier, because you are less likely to have half the pan done while the other half needs 10 more minutes. If you want a simple habit, aim for pieces that look like they belong to the same batch, not a mix of large and tiny fragments. Once size is even, the next speed factor is simply how small you decide to go. Smaller potato pieces cook faster because increasing surface area lets heat enter from more directions at once. If you have a potato, heat mostly travels from the outside inward toward one center. If you dice it, each cube has a shorter distance from surface to center, so the interior reaches tenderness sooner. For scale, thin fries or small cubes can cook in minutes, while whole potatoes can take close to an hour, depending on size and method. That difference is why recipes specify cut size instead of simply saying cut the potatoes, even when the potato type stays the same. The cut you choose also shapes the final texture. Thin pieces give you more edge per bite, which matters for crispness, while larger pieces give you more soft center, which matters for a fluffy interior. Smaller cuts also expose more broken cells at the surface, and that means more loose starch on the outside. That leads to the next simple prep step that can change texture: rinsing. Rinsing cut potatoes removes some surface starch, which can help prevent a sticky or gummy exterior in certain dishes. When potatoes are cut, Starch from broken cells can smear onto the surface, and in water that starch can show up as a faint cloudiness. A quick rinse under cold water can wash away that loose layer, so pieces are less likely to glue together and less likely to form a thick, starchy coating that steams rather than browns. This matters most when you want edges that stay distinct, like fries, roasted potatoes, or pan-fried cubes. It can also help keep boiling potatoes from turning the surface overly slick, especially when the pieces are small and the pot is crowded. Rinsing is not about stripping the potato of what it is. It is just removing the extra starch that has been dragged to the outside by the knife. Once rinsing is in mind, soaking becomes the next step for people chasing extra crispness, because it gives starch more time to move off the surface. Soaking cut potatoes in cold water for about 30 minutes can pull away more excess surface starch, which often helps fries and roasted pieces brown more cleanly. For scale, the water may turn noticeably cloudy after a soak, showing that starch has moved from the potato's surface into the bowl. The practical consequence is that the outside is less likely to turn gummy and more likely to dry quickly once heat hits it, which supports crisping. Soaking also has a simple scheduling benefit. It keeps cut potatoes from browning while you prep other ingredients, which can make timing easier for a bigger meal. It is a temporary hold rather than a long-term storage method, and the goal is not to leave the potatoes in water for hours until they taste washed out. 30 minutes is usually enough to see an effect without turning prep into a project. When the soak is finished, the next step is not fancy at all, but it matters. You remove the water because surface water is the enemy of browning. Drying potato pieces before cooking improves browning because water on the surface must turn to steam before the surface can get hot enough to crisp. A towel, a salad spinner, or even a few minutes of air drying can make a noticeable difference, especially for roasted wedges and pan-fried potatoes. The scale is simple. Even a thin film of water can keep the surface temperature pinned near the boiling point until that water is gone, delaying browning and encouraging softness instead of crisp edges. Dry surfaces heat faster, and once they heat, they can take on color and flavor through caramelization and gentle browning reactions. Drying also helps oil do its job more evenly. If water is clinging to the surface, oil has a harder time coating the potato, and you can end up with patchy browning. This is one of the quiet reasons restaurant fries feel so consistent. The surface is managed before it ever meets the heat. Once the pieces are dry, the next basic technique is seasoning in the right place at the right time. And for potatoes, that often starts in the cooking water. Salting potato. Cooking water seasons the potato from within, because salt can move into the potato as it cooks. In a pot of water, the potato is absorbing hot water as its starch softens, and dissolved salt can travel along with that water, reaching deeper than a sprinkle on the outside. For scale, a potato boiled in unsalted water often tastes flat, even with salt added later, while a potato cooked in well-salted water tends to taste seasoned all the way through, with less salt overall on the plate. This is why many cooks treat salted water as the foundation rather than the finishing touch. It gives you a steadier baseline, and then you can adjust the final salt with more precision once the potato is drained and ready for whatever comes next. With clean skins, a clear choice about peeling, even cuts, controlled surface starch, a properly dry surface, and smart seasoning, the next facts naturally turn toward moist heat methods like boiling and steaming, where these prep choices show their results. Starting potatoes in cold water and bringing the pot up to a boil helps them cook more evenly from the outside to the center. When the water warms gradually, the potato warms gradually too. The outside has time to soften at a similar pace to the inside, so you are less likely to end up with edges that are falling apart while the center still feels firm. If you drop potatoes into already boiling water, the outside gets a head start. That can work for very small pieces, but it can be rough on larger chunks. For scale, a 1-inch cube can tolerate that shortcut because heat has a short trip to the middle. A whole potato or a thick wedge often cannot because heat needs time to travel inward. Cold starting also gives you a wider window where the potato is heating steadily, which reduces the chance of the edges breaking down before the middle is tender. Once the starting point is set, the next simple control is the size of the potatoes when they hit the water. Whole potatoes take longer to cook than cut pieces, even when the total weight is the same, because heat has farther to travel to reach the center. A potato, the size of your fist, can need several times the cooking time of the same potato cut into chunks, simply because each chunk has more surface area and a shorter distance from surface to core. That difference changes what boiling is good for. Whole potatoes are convenient when you want intact skins, when you want fewer cut surfaces, and when you do not mind waiting longer. Cut potatoes are better when you need speed, or when you want a uniform mash with no hard centers. The most common problem is mixing sizes in one pot. Small pieces finish early, then keep cooking, then begin falling apart, while the larger pieces are still catching up. Keeping pieces similar in size is the quiet step that prevents a pot from turning half perfect and half overcooked. Once size is under control, the next practical skill is knowing exactly when the potatoes are done. A cooked potato is properly done when a thin knife or skewer slides in with very little resistance. This test matters because potatoes can look finished on the outside before the inside is truly tender. A thick fork can be misleading. It can force its way through a slightly undercooked center and still feel fine, especially if the surface is already soft. For scale, a skewer about the width of a chopstick gives you a more honest read because it will not disguise firmness in the middle. The practical habit is simple. Test the thickest piece. If it yields easily, the smaller pieces are usually ready too. Once you can recognize doneness clearly, the next important fact is what happens when you push past it. Overcooking. Boiled potatoes makes them absorb excess water and lose structure. As they sit in hot water after they are tender, the surface continues to soften and the edges can turn mushy. In a rolling boil, cooked potatoes can also bang around and break. When pieces break, they expose more surface area to water, and that accelerates the problem. For scale, even 5 extra minutes can be the difference between firm cubes for salad and pieces that crumble into cloudy starch. The practical fix is to stop as soon as they are tender. Drain promptly, rather than letting the potatoes sit in hot water while you finish something else. That draining step matters more than most people think, because the potatoes keep changing even after the water leaves. Draining boiled potatoes and letting them sit uncovered for a few minutes helps steam escape, which improves texture. This short rest dries the surface slightly and lets some internal moisture redistribute, so the potatoes feel less wet when you mash them or dress them. For scale, 2 to 5 minutes in the warm pot, off heat, can noticeably reduce the watery look of boiled potatoes. This is especially useful for mashed potatoes, where extra water can force you to add more butter or dairy just to regain a creamy feel. A simple, uncovered rest is a quiet way to keep flavor concentrated because you are not diluting the potato with more water than it needs. Once you notice how much boiling water can pull from the potato, steaming becomes an easy comparison. Steaming potatoes can preserve more water-soluble nutrients than boiling because less of the potato is in direct contact with liquid water. In boiling, some vitamins and minerals can move into the cooking water. In steaming, the moisture is mostly vapor, so there is less opportunity for nutrients to leach out. The difference is usually most noticeable when potatoes are cut into smaller pieces, because more surface area touches water during boiling. Steaming also changes what the pot looks like at the end. Because the potatoes are not tumbling in starchy water, the pot often stays cleaner, and there is less cloudy liquid to manage. It is not a dramatic transformation, but it is a steady one, and some cooks prefer it for weeknight sides. Once you see steaming as its own option, the next question is how the texture compares. Steamed potatoes often come out slightly firmer than boiled potatoes, even when they are fully tender. Boiling surrounds the potato with liquid water at a consistent temperature, and the constant movement of water can soften the outside quickly. Steaming delivers heat through vapor, and it tends to be gentler on the surface. For scale, a steamed cube can feel more intact when tossed with butter or folded into a salad, while a boiled cube of the same size is more likely to roughen at the edges. That firmer structure can be a plus when you want clean pieces that do not smear starch into a dressing. If you are building a salad or any dish where you will stir after cooking, steaming is an easy way to keep the pieces tidy. Once the texture difference is clear, the next question becomes flavor, because moist heat methods can carry aromas into the potato in subtle ways. Adding aromatics like garlic cloves or herb sprigs to steaming water can lend a mild background fragrance to potatoes. The effect is gentle because the potato is not soaking in flavored water, and the main seasoning still needs to happen with salt and fat. But steam moves through the pot, and it can carry a faint aroma upward and around the potatoes as they cook. For scale, the change is often more noticeable in thin-skinned potatoes or smaller pieces, where surface area is higher and the aroma has more contact. The practical use is restraint. Aromatics can add a quiet layer without turning the potatoes into a strongly flavored dish on their own. With moist heat methods in mind, with size controlled, and with doneness easy to read, the next facts naturally move to dry heat, where potatoes trade water for browned edges and crisp skins. Baking a potato at higher oven heat helps the skin dry, while the inside turns tender. That balance is the reason a baked potato can be fluffy inside without tasting watery. In many home kitchens, the oven is set somewhere in the 400 degree F to 450 degree etc. range, because that heat is strong enough to dry the skin in a reasonable time while the center slowly softens. The simple idea is that moisture has to leave the surface before the surface can truly brown and crisp. As long as the skin is still releasing water, the surface stays busy evaporating and browning waits its turn. High heat does not automatically scorch a potato because the damp skin is still losing moisture and staying cooler than a fully dry surface would. Very low oven heat can create the opposite problem. The inside can soften while the skin stays humid for so long that it turns tough instead of crisp. That is also why the first stretch of baking can feel slow. The potato is mostly moving water outward before it can build a crust. Once you are thinking about moisture leaving the skin, the next question is how that moisture escapes without building pressure under the surface. Pricking a whole potato before baking reduces the chance of the skin splitting because it gives steam a controlled way out. A potato is mostly water. As it heats, some of that water turns to vapor, and vapor takes up more space than liquid water. If the skin stays sealed, pressure can build. A few small holes are enough to prevent a sudden rupture. You are not draining the potato, and you are not trying to dry the center with the fork. You are simply giving steam an easy exit route so the skin is less likely to tear along a seam. This matters most with larger potatoes, where the center heats slowly and steam has more time to accumulate. With steam given a path, the next lever is what you put on the outside to help the skin brown in a pleasant way. A thin coat of oil on the skin helps a baked potato crisp more evenly because oil supports browning and reduces dry, leathery patches. The skin of a potato has tiny ridges and pores. Oil fills in that roughness and helps heat spread across the surface more uniformly. For scale, you only need a light sheen, not a thick layer. The practical result is a skin that is more pleasant to eat, with fewer spots that stay pale and papery. Oil also helps salt cling, so a light sprinkle stays put instead of falling off onto the pan. This is mostly a surface effect. It will not make the center oily because the oil is doing its work on the outside. Once you see oil as a surface tool, foil becomes an easy contrast rather than a mystery. Wrapping potatoes in foil traps moisture, so the potato steams inside its own jacket instead of drying into a crisp skin. The inside still becomes tender, but the outside stays soft because trapped steam keeps the surface damp. A damp surface does not brown the same way a dry surface does. In practice, an unwrapped potato at a hot oven temperature tends to develop a firmer, drier skin and a slightly fluffier interior. A foil-wrapped potato at the same heat tends to come out with a softer skin and a more uniformly moist interior. The practical point is that foil is a texture choice, not a shortcut to doneness. It can also be useful when you need the potato to stay warm for a while without the skin getting tough, because the trapped steam keeps the outside pliable. With either approach, the only real finish line is the center, and that is where baked potatoes are often misjudged. A baked potato is done when the center yields easily. The most reliable test is still physical. A thin skewer or knife should slide into the thickest part with almost no resistance. When that happens, the starches have softened all the way through, and the interior is ready to fluff. Some cooks also use temperature as a reference point, and a fully tender baked potato often lands around the low 200s Fahrenheit, near about 205 degrees F, when the center is truly soft. The exact number can vary with size and variety, which is why the skewer remains the simplest guide. Time varies too. A very large potato can take close to an hour at high heat, while smaller ones may be ready sooner, simply because heat has a shorter distance to travel. The practical consequence is that the skin can look perfect while the middle is still firm. Checking the thickest point prevents that surprise. If the skewer meets a hard core, giving the potato more time is usually better than turning the heat higher, because the outside may already be as dry as it can get. Once whole potatoes make sense in the oven, the same heat logic becomes even easier to see on cut potatoes, where edges take over. Roasting potato. Pieces at high heat builds browned edges because the cut surfaces dry and then begin to brown. The same 400 degree F to 450 degrees range often works here because you need enough heat to evaporate surface water before color and crispness can develop. The order stays simple. Moisture leaves first, then browning starts. And browning is where roasted potatoes pick up their deeper, slightly sweet toasted flavor. Compared with boiling, roasting concentrates the potato's taste a little because less water is being absorbed and more is leaving. You often see this change on the corners first. Corners dry quickest, and heat reaches them from more than one direction, so they are the first places to turn golden and crisp. Roasting rewards surface management, and surface management begins with how the pieces are coated. Tossing potato pieces in oil before roasting promotes even browning. Oil improves contact with heat and reduces the chance of dry patches that stay pale. A thin, glossy film helps the surface warm more consistently and encourages the outside to crisp instead of turning leathery, especially on corners and cut faces. In everyday terms, you want the pieces to look lightly dressed, not drenched. Too little oil can leave rough, dry spots that brown unevenly. Too much oil can slow down drying and keep the surface slick, which can delay good color and make the texture feel heavy. A light coat is usually the most effective. Oil also helps any seasoning stick, so salt and spices stay on the potato instead of falling to the bottom of the bowl. Even with the right amount of oil, though, the pan setup can undo you if pieces are packed too tightly, which is where crowding becomes the main enemy of crispness. Crowding potatoes on a baking sheet traps steam between the pieces, which keeps surfaces damp and slows browning. Even in a hot oven, water leaving one piece raises humidity around its neighbors. That local steam acts like a lid you did not intend to use. If pieces are touching edge to edge, you are more likely to get pale sides and soft bottoms, especially in the center of the pan, where moisture has fewer escape routes. Crowding can turn what you hoped would be roasting into something closer to steaming. The potatoes can still become tender, but crispness stays out of reach. The practical fix is space. A single layer with room between pieces lets hot air circulate and gives moisture a place to go. If a tray is full, splitting into 2 trays often works better than hoping extra time will solve it. Once there is space for drying, the last simple lever is giving more than one side a turn at the hottest contact. Flipping roasted potatoes partway through cooking browns more sides. The face against the pan gets strong contact heat, while the top face relies more on hot air. One deliberate flip around the halfway mark is usually enough to expose a damp side to the pan and to stop a browned side from darkening too far. The practical consequence is balance. More even crispness, fewer pale patches, and a tray that finishes together instead of giving you a mix of perfect pieces and underbrowned pieces. It also keeps the texture from being one-sided, with crunch only underneath and softness everywhere else. A single flip is usually better than constant stirring because it preserves edges long enough to brown. After you see how dryness and heat contact create crispness in the oven, it becomes easier to understand why hot oil can create the same effect faster and why temperature matters so much there. Frying makes potatoes crisp because hot fat drives water out of the surface very quickly. That quick drying creates a thin shell before the inside has time to lose all its moisture. In simple terms, the outside stops behaving like a wet potato and starts behaving like a crust. That is why a fry can crackle even when the center stays soft. The crisp shell forms fastest when surface water escapes as steam in an even, steady way, not sputtering in bursts. Once you see crispness as water leaving on purpose, the most important control becomes the heat of the oil. For most classic fries, an oil temperature around 350 to 375 degrees is a dependable sweet spot. That range is hot enough to set the outside quickly, but not so hot that the surface browns hard before the center cooks through. Small temperature swings matter in frying. A shift that feels minor on a dial can change the result from pale and limp to deeply browned and brittle, even with the same potato and the same cut. Oil transfers heat efficiently, and it responds immediately when the temperature drifts. That is why one stable temperature matters more than almost any seasoning you add later. Once temperature is treated as the main ingredient, it becomes easier to understand what goes wrong when the oil is not hot enough. When oil is too cool, potatoes absorb more oil and turn greasy. The surface takes longer to firm up, so it keeps acting like a sponge. While the potato is still soft and wet at the edges, oil can slip into tiny gaps where water has not yet pushed outward as steam. Fries cooked in oil that is closer to the low 300s can look done on the outside, but feel heavy and limp. The surface never fully sets into a crisp shell, and the interior can end up soft in a dull way, instead of tender in a fluffy way. The simple fix is heat, but it is also timing. Adding a new batch cools the oil, and the oil needs a moment to recover between batches. Waiting for that recovery keeps the temperature from slowly drifting downward as you cook. That idea of working in stages sets up one of the most reliable crispness tricks in frying: cooking twice on purpose. Double frying is a classic method because it separates cooking the inside from crisping the outside. Instead of trying to do everything at once, you give the potato a first cook that focuses on tenderness, then a second cook that focuses on crunch. Even a casual eater can notice the difference. Single fried fries often soften quickly after they come out. Double fried fries tend to stay crisp longer because the outside has been built more deliberately. The practical reason is that the first cook changes the inside structure and removes some moisture, so the second cook can spend its energy building a firm crust instead of fighting a wet surface. Once you think in 2 steps, each step becomes easier to control. The first fry is mainly for cooking the interior, and the second fry is mainly for drying and browning the surface. Many cooks do the first stage at a lower temperature so the center can soften without rushing color. The fries may look pale after this first cook, and that paleness is part of the point. You are building tenderness without turning the outside into a dark shell too early. Then the second stage happens at the higher temperature, often back in that 350 to 375 degrees range, where the outside dries quickly and turns crisp. The second fry tends to move fast because the surface has already been prepared to set and crackle. This 2-stage logic also explains why another method works so well for home cooks: giving the potato a small head start with water before it ever meets oil. Parboiling potatoes before frying can reduce frying time and improve the odds of a tender center, especially for thicker fries or home-cut wedges. A brief simmer softens the outer layer and begins the same tenderness process you want inside the fry. In everyday terms, water does a little of the slow work first, so the oil does not have to do all the interior cooking on its own. For scale, even a few minutes of parboiling can shift the final texture from brown outside, firm middle, to crisp outside, fully tender middle. The practical payoff is consistency. When the interior has a head start, the oil can focus more on crispness and color, which brings up a detail that matters every single time you fry. Surface water and hot oil do not mix calmly. Patting potatoes dry before frying reduces dangerous splatter and improves crispness at the same time. Water and hot oil react violently when water hits the oil and flashes into steam. Even a thin film of water can cause popping and spurting because steam expands quickly and pushes oil outward. The habit that prevents most of that is simple: drain well and dry the surface. The difference between barely a sound and oil snapping hard can be as small as whether the potatoes were patted dry for a minute. Drying also helps temperature control. If the potatoes go in wet, the oil spends extra energy boiling off that water, and the temperature drops more than it needs to. Less surface moisture means less drama, and it also means the oil stays steadier. With frying, safety and crispness point in the same direction, which makes the next choice feel natural. Picking a potato that wants to fry well in the first place. Starchy potatoes tend to make the fluffiest French fries because their drier interiors cook into a lighter, airier center. Russets are the common example. Their higher starch and lower moisture balance helps the inside turn tender without becoming creamy or dense. A starchy fry often breaks with a soft, steamy interior. A waxier fry is more likely to bend and feel heavier through the middle. The practical consequence is contrast. Starchy potatoes give you a bigger gap between crisp shell and fluffy center, which is the texture most people picture when they imagine a classic fry. Once you know which potatoes excel at that style, it becomes easier to choose a different type on purpose for frying styles that need pieces to stay more intact. Waxy potatoes hold together better for hash browns and home fries because they keep their shape and resist crumbling as they brown. In a pan, those firmer, cohesive pieces can take on color at the edges while staying distinct. They are less likely to shed little fragments that burn before the larger pieces finish cooking. For scale, this is the difference between a skillet full of clean, browned cubes and a skillet full of broken bits that turn dark too quickly. The practical point is that best for frying depends on what you want to fry. Fluffy fries usually lean starchy. Tidy browned pieces often do better with waxy or in-between potatoes. With frying, the outside is about crispness and color, but the inside is about structure. That structure question is what makes the next transition feel natural, because once you understand how heat can preserve a center, it becomes easier to understand what happens when you deliberately break potatoes down into mash and silky purees. Mashing works because cooked potatoes soften enough that their cell walls give way. Once that structure relaxes, the potato can break down into a cohesive mass instead of staying in firm pieces. Doneness matters more than most people think. A potato that is just barely tender will still resist, and when you try to force it smooth, it often turns grainy. A fully tender potato yields easily and comes together with only a few presses. For scale, this is the difference between a piece that still has a faint core of firmness and a piece that collapses the moment it meets a masher. The practical consequence is that texture starts before you mash. If the potatoes are not evenly cooked, you will chase lumps by mashing harder, and that extra effort creates a new problem of its own. Once the potatoes are cooked to the point where they surrender without a fight, the main thing to watch is how much you work them afterward. Overworking mashed potatoes makes them turn gluey because too much mixing releases more starch and lets it form a sticky network. Potatoes contain starch inside their cells. When you mash gently, you break the potato down without tearing and smearing too much starch across the surface. When you beat aggressively, you rupture more cells and spread starch into the mash, where it can link up and become stretchy. People often describe this as gummy or gluey because the mash starts to cling and pull instead of sitting softly in the bowl. For scale, the change can happen quickly, sometimes within a minute of extra stirring, once the potatoes are hot and fully cooked. The practical rule is simple. Mash just until the pieces come together, then stop and season. Chasing perfect smoothness by stirring longer is the fast route to heaviness. If you want very smooth potatoes, the tool you choose is usually more important than extra mixing. A potato ricer or a food mill can make a lighter, smoother mash than an electric mixer because it breaks potatoes down without whipping them. A ricer presses potato through small holes, creating fine strands that fall into the bowl and combine easily. A food mill shears and pushes the potato through a perforated plate, creating a uniform mash with relatively gentle force. For scale, these tools can make a big batch look silky with only a few folds, which lowers the risk of turning starch sticky. The practical benefit is control. You get smoothness from the tool, not from effort. And effort is what tends to trigger gumminess. Once the potato is broken down, what you add next changes the texture again, especially when temperature is involved. Adding warm milk or warm cream helps keep mashed potatoes smooth because it blends in without cooling the potatoes abruptly. Temperature changes matter because potatoes feel different as they cool. When the mash cools quickly, it can tighten and seem thicker. And that stiffness can tempt you to stir harder or add more liquid. Cold dairy can create that drop fast. For scale, a small splash of cold milk can make a pot of mash feel suddenly less fluid, even if you plan to add the same total amount in the end. Warming the dairy is not a fancy step. It simply keeps everything in the same gentle temperature range so the liquid folds in easily and the mash stays relaxed. Temperature is also why butter tends to behave best when it goes in early while the potatoes are still hot. Adding butter before most of the liquid can make mashed potatoes feel silkier because fat coats the potato and reduces stickiness. In practical terms, butter acts like a buffer. When it melts into hot potato, it coats surfaces and makes the mash feel smoother before you add milk or cream. That coating can help the potatoes accept liquid with less stirring, which is one of the simplest ways to avoid glue. For scale, even a few tablespoons mixed in early can change how quickly the mash turns creamy, because the potatoes begin to slide together instead of grabbing onto each other. This is why many cooks start with butter, then adjust with warm milk or cream until the texture lands where they want it. The order is small, but the effect can be clear, especially in a large pot where small differences add up. Potato choice also does part of the work. Starchy potatoes tend to make the fluffiest mashed potatoes because they break down into light flakes when cooked. Russets are the common example. they are more likely to fall apart easily, so the mash can feel airy and soft without much force. Very waxy potatoes are more likely to turn pasty when mashed because they hold together tightly. When you try to force waxy potatoes smooth, they can become dense, and if you overwork them, they can start to feel slightly stretchy. For scale, a starchy mash often looks a bit matte and mounds gently in the bowl, while a waxier mash can look shinier and feel heavier on the spoon. The practical takeaway is that potato choice reduces how much technique you need. If the potato naturally wants to fall into flakes, you do not have to fight it. If you are using an all-purpose potato, gentle handling becomes even more important because you are balancing between fluff and glue. In that balance, leaving a few small lumps can actually improve mashed potato texture. Lumps are not always a flaw. Small lumps can be a sign you stopped early, before the starch became sticky. They can also add a rustic mouthfeel that feels pleasant in a simple meal. For scale, pea-sized bits often disappear on the tongue once butter and warm dairy are folded in, especially if the potatoes were cooked evenly. Large chunks are different. Big chunks usually mean the potatoes were not cooked uniformly to begin with, or that the pieces were not the same size in the pot. The practical consequence is that perfectly smooth is not always the same as best, especially when smoothness comes at the cost of heaviness. If the goal is truly smooth mash, changing method is safer than stirring longer. For an ultra-smooth puree, pushing potatoes through a food mill is usually safer than using an electric mixer. A mixer smooths by beating, and beating is what encourages starch to turn sticky. A food mill smooths by forcing the potato through small openings, which breaks it down evenly without whipping. The texture you get can be extremely fine, almost like a thick sauce once it is enriched with butter and warm cream. For scale, this kind of puree is smooth enough to spread cleanly on a plate or hold its shape neatly when spooned, without developing the gluey stretch that mixing can create. The practical effect is consistency. You build silkiness with method and fat, not with aggressive stirring. As you keep these ideas in mind, the patterns start to repeat. Cook the potato fully so it yields without resistance. Work it gently so you do not smear too much starch. Choose a tool that gives you the texture you want without demanding extra mixing. Keep additions warm so the mash stays relaxed. Add butter early to coat and soften the feel. Then adjust with warm milk or cream. And choose a potato type that naturally leans toward fluff or toward a denser, more cohesive texture. These are small decisions, but they are the decisions that separate light, tender mash from a pot that turns heavy and sticky. Once you understand how the same cooked potato can become fluffy mash, rustic mash, or a silky puree, it becomes easier to see why potato dishes around the world feel so different from each other. Many famous recipes are really variations on these same texture choices. Some traditions aim for airy and light, some aim for smooth and rich, and some aim for structure that still holds together under gravy or sauce. With that in mind, the next facts can widen out from technique into tradition, because the potato's most famous dishes are often just different answers to the same quiet question. How much do you let the potato hold its shape, and how much do you encourage it to melt? Potato gnocchi are soft dumplings where cooked potato is worked into a simple dough so the finished texture stays tender with relatively little flour. The pieces are usually small, often around thumb size, so they cook quickly and float up in simmering water when they are done. The practical consequence is delicacy. Potato starch and moisture help the dumplings stay soft instead of turning chewy the way a flour-heavy dough can. That is why recipes often stress starting with potatoes that are dry and well cooked. Extra moisture forces you to add more flour, and more flour makes the dumplings heavier. Because the flavor is gentle, gnocchi carries simple sauces well, and the potato mostly shows up as a soft texture rather than a strong taste. That same idea of potatoes giving structure to a dish with very few ingredients shows up in a classic Spanish omelet. A Spanish tortilla, often called tortilla española, is a thick, sliceable omelet built from potatoes and eggs, with potatoes supplying most of the bulk and eggs binding everything into one cohesive round. For scale, it is commonly cooked in a wide pan and cut into many wedges, so one tortilla can become several portions without needing separate side dishes. The simple why is that potato pieces hold moisture and heat while the egg firms up around them, so the center stays tender instead of drying out like a thin scramble. The potatoes are usually cooked until soft before the egg sets, which is why the finished slice feels unified rather than crunchy. It is also a dish that can be served warm or at room temperature, which makes it practical for tables where food sits out briefly. The potato does quiet work here, turning eggs into something that eats like a full meal. In other cuisines, potatoes do that same quiet work by absorbing and softening bold spice. In aloo gobi, potatoes cook alongside cauliflower in warming spices, and the potato's mild flavor helps strong aromatics feel rounded rather than sharp. A useful scale detail is built into the name. Aloo refers to potato, and gobi refers to cauliflower, so the dish is centered on those vegetables rather than on a heavy sauce. The practical consequence is that potato cubes pick up seasoning on their surfaces while staying gentle inside, so the dish feels satisfying even when the cooking liquid is minimal. Potatoes also tend to hold their shape better than many vegetables when simmered, which helps them share the pan with cauliflower without dissolving into it. That steadiness gives spices something to cling to, keeping flavor present as the vegetables soften. Aloo gobi is a clear example of potatoes acting as a calm carrier in a spiced dish. In colder kitchens, potatoes often play that same role by welcoming greens into a familiar, soft base. Colcannon is an Irish dish that combines mashed potatoes with leafy greens like cabbage or kale, turning a familiar mash into something more vegetable-forward without losing its softness. For scale, a few handfuls of chopped greens can transform a whole pot, adding mild bite and a little color that keeps each spoonful from tasting one note. The practical consequence is balance. Potato brings creamy starch, while greens bring freshness and a slight bitterness that can make butter and salt taste clearer rather than heavier. The greens are typically cooked until tender, so they fold in gently instead of feeling raw inside the mash. Because everything is mixed into a soft base, the dish carries vegetables in a way that still feels mild for people who prefer quiet flavors. Colcannon also shows how potatoes can accept other textures without losing cohesion. If you shift from mashed to grated, that same potato base becomes the starting point for crisp pancakes in several countries. Kartoffelpuffer are German potato pancakes, and their defining feature is that grated potato is fried into a thin cake with a browned, crisp exterior. For scale, they are often made about palm-sized, which creates a high ratio of crunchy edge to tender center, and that contrast is part of what makes them feel distinct from a thick hash brown. The practical reason is that shredding exposes a lot of surface area, More surface area means moisture can escape quickly, and the remaining starch can set into a firm layer that holds together as it browns. Draining or squeezing the grated potato helps, because less water in the pan means faster browning and a cleaner crust. These pancakes are closely related in idea to latkes and other grated potato cakes, which rely on the same simple principle of drying and browning. Because the potato flavor stays mild, they can be paired with sweet or tangy toppings without the base tasting confused. Mashed potato can also be shaped into firmer forms, especially when it is pressed and chilled. Peruvian causa uses seasoned mashed potato as a firm, moldable layer that can be stacked with fillings, almost like an edible framework for a chilled, savory dish. For scale, it is commonly shaped into blocks or rounds and served in neat portions, which is possible because the potato is pressed and cooled until it holds its form. The practical consequence is structure. Mild potato creates a steady layer that helps sharper flavors in the filling feel organized instead of scattered. Many versions season the potato with lime and a gentle chili, which brightens the mash without making it taste like citrus fruit. Because it is served cool, the layers stay clean when sliced, instead of loosening the way warm mash can. It is a reminder that cooling can be a texture tool, not just a storage step. That pressed, unified potato texture also appears in Switzerland in a very different shape, as one wide, crisp cake. Rösti is a Swiss potato cake where shredded potatoes are pressed into one flat round and browned until the outside forms a crust while the inside stays tender. The scale can be pan-wide like a thin pie, so the crust becomes one broad sheet rather than scattered crisp bits across separate pieces. The practical consequence is cohesion. Compacted potato shreds behave like a single starch structure once the surface dries and browns, so you can cut slices that hold together instead of crumbling. Some versions start with potatoes that are cooled or partly cooked first, because firmer shreds pack neatly and brown more evenly. Unlike fries, which are many separate pieces, Rösti concentrates crispness into one continuous surface, almost like a crust you can slice. That single surface crispness depends on steady heat and patient browning, not quick tossing and constant stirring. If you move from shreds to thin slices, potatoes can stack into layers and thicken dairy as they cook. Gratin dauphinois is a French dish where thin potato slices cook slowly in cream until the slices turn tender and the surrounding liquid thickens around them. For scale, the slices are often very thin and layered closely, which creates a lot of contact between potato starch and dairy as they heat together. The practical consequence is that the potato itself helps build the sauce. Starch moves from the slices into the cream, making it cling without flour or cornstarch. Slow baking also means the layers soften at a similar pace, so the finished dish can be cut into neat portions without the center collapsing into soup. Garlic is commonly used to season the cream, giving a savory backbone while the potato stays mild. A lightly browned top is a visual cue that enough surface moisture has left for a gentle crust to form. Potatoes can also be simmered until a sauce reduces and grips them tightly, which is the core idea behind a Korean glazed potato side. Gamja jorum is a Korean side dish where small potatoes are simmered in a soy-based sauce until the liquid reduces and coats them in a glossy glaze. For scale, the potatoes are often kept small or cut into large chunks, so they stay intact through simmering and turn tender without breaking apart as the sauce thickens. The practical consequence is layering. The outside becomes savory sweet and well seasoned, while the inside stays mild, so the dish feels steady and flavorful in the same bite. The sauce often includes a little sugar or syrup, not to make it dessert-like, but to help the glaze taste rounded and look shiny. Reduction does most of the work. As water leaves the pan, the remaining sauce becomes thicker and clings more strongly to the potato surface. Served as a small side, it shows how potatoes can carry bold flavor without deep frying or dairy. Once you have seen potatoes succeed in so many forms, the common problems become easier to spot and easier to fix. Gummy mashed potatoes usually come from too much mixing. Extra stirring releases more starch, and that starch can tighten into a sticky, stretchy texture. The shift can happen fast, sometimes after only a short stretch of aggressive beating once the potatoes are hot and soft. The practical consequence is that smoothness should come from the tool, not from effort. Pressing through a ricer, folding gently, and stopping when the last firm pieces disappear keeps the mash light. When you keep the work brief, the potato stays soft instead of turning gluey. Once mash texture is under control, the next common surprise is the opposite problem, when the outside looks finished, but the center is still firm. Undercooked centers in baked or roasted potatoes often happen when the pieces are too large for the time and heat you are using. A hot oven can brown the surface early, and that early color can look like a finish line even when the middle still needs steady heat to soften. It is similar to toasting something thick. The outside can change first while the center catches up more slowly. The practical fix is usually size and patience. Cutting pieces more evenly, choosing smaller chunks, or giving the potatoes a little more time at the same heat tends to solve the problem more reliably than turning the oven higher. Once the center finally yields, the next question is stopping at that moment instead of drifting past it. Potatoes that fall apart during boiling are usually a sign they have cooked past tender and lost enough structure that the edges cannot hold together. This shows up quickly with smaller cuts because they have more surface area to soften and more corners that can break away once the starch is fully swollen. A hard rolling boil adds another pressure. The movement of the water knocks soft pieces against the pot and against each other, which breaks edges faster than heat alone would. A gentle simmer is often kinder when you want clean cubes for salads or soups. The practical cue stays simple. As soon as a thin knife slides in easily, drain them. Letting them sit in hot water just for a bit is often how a tidy pot turns cloudy and ragged. Draining on time also supports the next goal, which is potatoes that are tender but still able to crisp. Soggy roasted potatoes usually mean the surfaces stayed too wet for browning to begin. Moisture can come from pieces that were not dried well after rinsing or soaking. It can also build up when pieces are packed too tightly, because steam has nowhere to escape and keeps the air around the potatoes humid. The everyday sign is pale, soft edges, even after plenty of oven time, especially in the middle of a crowded pan. The practical fix is mostly surface management. Dry the pieces thoroughly, spread them in a single layer with breathing room, and let the oven work on a drier surface. When moisture has an escape route, browning becomes much easier. Once roasting is crisp again, frying has its own common complaint, where color develops too fast and makes the potatoes look overdone before the centers are tender. Potatoes that brown too quickly or develop dark spots during frying can be reacting to extra sugars that built up during very cold storage. In cold conditions, some potato starch can convert into sugar. Sugar darkens faster than starch in hot oil, so the surface can color early and look burnt even when the oil temperature is reasonable. The practical clue is simple and visual. If fries turn dark before they feel tender inside, storage temperature may be part of the story. You do not need to chase exact chemistry to use that clue. It is simply a way to explain why the same frying setup can behave differently with a different bag of potatoes. Once you recognize this pattern, the next step becomes a gentle timing choice rather than a completely different recipe. Letting potatoes that were stored very cold rest at a cool room temperature can sometimes reduce excessive darkening. As the potato returns toward its normal balance, sugar levels may shift again. The helpful scale here is patience more than minutes. A short rest warms the surface, which can help frying behave more predictably, but a longer rest can be more meaningful if the goal is to change browning behavior rather than just remove the chill. This is not a guarantee, so it is best treated as an adjustment, not a fixed rule. If fries are the plan right away, choosing potatoes that have not been chilled is often the simplest path. Either way, the next common surprise is not about color, but about the skin turning tougher than expected in the oven. Tough baked potato skins often come from baking too low, or from not giving the skin enough time at a strong heat to dry and crisp properly. At lower heat, the skin can slowly dehydrate into a leathery layer while the inside turns tender, which creates an odd mismatch when you bite through it. A hotter bake encourages the skin to dry and brown in a way that becomes crisp rather than chewy. The practical cue is in the feel. A good skin should feel dry and slightly firm once the center is done, not damp and rubbery. If the inside is tender, but the skin still feels stubborn, the oven may have been too gentle for the result you wanted. When texture stays strange, even after careful baking, another issue can show up in a different method, especially in boiling. Unexpected color changes. Discolored boiled potatoes, sometimes grayish or bluish, can come from reactions between natural potato compounds, the cooking water, and certain metals in cookware. Conditions like slightly alkaline water can make this shift more noticeable, and it can change the look more than the safety. It is not automatically a sign of spoilage. Often the potatoes still taste normal, but the color can look unappetizing in salads or in a pale mash. The scale can be small, like faint shadowing, or more noticeable across a whole batch depending on the pot and the water. If it happens, the easiest response is to treat it as an appearance issue and then adjust what the potatoes touch during cooking. Using cookware that is less reactive, like stainless steel or enamel-coated pots, can help prevent those unwanted color shifts. These surfaces are more stable in boiling water, so the potatoes are less likely to pick up gray tones as they cook. It is a simple equipment choice that can keep white potatoes looking clean and gold potatoes looking warm, especially when you care about appearance as well as taste. If changing the pot is not an option, keeping the cooking conditions gentle can also help. And some cooks use a small splash of acid to nudge the water away from the conditions that encourage grayness. The calmest solution, though, is usually just the right pot and a steady boil or simmer. With the biggest potato problems easier to name and avoid, the last stretch can settle into small habits that make leftovers and weeknight potatoes behave kindly, so the next cooking session starts from a more predictable place. Leftover baked potatoes keep their texture better than many people expect, as long as they are cooled and stored promptly. Once a potato has baked all the way through, the inside has already reached an even tenderness. So, reheating is usually about restoring warmth, not rebuilding structure. For scale, a baked potato often holds up for several days in the refrigerator, especially if it is kept whole rather than cut into pieces that dry out at the edges. The practical consequence is that a reheated baked potato can still feel smooth and cohesive inside, instead of turning grainy the way an unevenly cooked potato can. If you want the skin to feel crisper again, dry heat helps more than moist heat, because steam tends to soften what was once crisp. Once you know baked potatoes reheat well, it becomes easier to plan for intentional leftovers, including mash. Mashed potatoes can be frozen with reasonable results when they are portioned, sealed well, and reheated gently. Smaller portions tend to reheat more evenly than one large block, simply because heat has an easier time reaching the center without overheating the edges. The practical consequence is convenience. A few containers or flat portions can turn a future meal into a quick rewarm instead of a full cooking session. When reheating, gentle heat with occasional folding usually keeps the mash smooth, while high heat can make the texture feel heavier and encourage extra stirring that risks gumminess. If thawed mash looks slightly separated, a small addition of warm milk, cream, or butter while you fold it back together can help the texture become cohesive again. Once you're thinking about keeping potato texture stable, preventing browning on raw-cut potatoes becomes the next small habit that makes prep feel calmer. A small amount of acid can slow browning on cut potatoes because it reduces the reaction that darkens exposed potato flesh. When potato flesh is exposed to air, natural enzymes and oxygen begin changing its color, especially on thin slices and small cubes with lots of surface area. In everyday kitchen terms, a mildly acidic environment makes that browning process less active, so the surface stays lighter for longer. The practical consequence is flexibility. You can prep potatoes ahead without feeling rushed to cook them immediately, and the pieces stay pale and clean-looking while you finish other steps. Acid water is still a short-term hold rather than a long soak meant for long storage, because long soaking can wash away some flavor and surface starch. If you want speed more than holding time, the fastest method for whole potatoes has its own trade-off. Microwaving whole potatoes cooks them quickly, but it usually produces softer skin than oven baking because the potato steams itself from the inside. A potato is mostly water, and microwaves heat water-rich food efficiently, so the interior warms fast and turns tender in minutes instead of close to an hour. The practical consequence is texture. The inside can be fluffy and fully cooked, but the skin tends to stay thin and pliable rather than crisp and dry. If you want to compromise, many cooks microwave first to cook the center, then finish briefly in a hot oven to dry and brown the skin. In that combination, the microwave provides speed and the oven provides dryness. Once you've cooked potatoes in water, another useful habit is deciding whether the cooking liquid is truly waste. Potato cooking water can be saved and used as a lightly starchy liquid in certain recipes. Some starch and water-soluble compounds move from the potato into the water as it simmers, which is why the water often looks faintly cloudy. The practical consequence is subtle usefulness. A splash of potato water can add body to soups, stews, or sauces without adding flour, because that suspended starch can help the liquid feel slightly thicker and smoother. It can also be a way to keep some of what would otherwise be poured away, since the cooking liquid may hold some dissolved minerals as well. This only works when the water is clean and pleasantly salted, so it is best saved from simple boils rather than from pots where the water is dirty, heavily spiced, or overly salty. Once you're thinking in practical pairings, the next habit is choosing the right potato for the job without overcomplicating it. Russet potatoes are excellent for baking and many frying styles, but they are often a poor choice for potato salads because they tend to fall apart when stirred. Their starchy, fluffy nature is an advantage when you want a tender interior that breaks into mash, but it works against you when you want neat cubes that stay distinct. For scale, a russet-based salad can turn cloudy and soft with only a few turns of the spoon, while a waxy potato salad is more likely to keep clean edges and a clearer dressing. The practical consequence is that best potato depends on the dish. Starchy types are strong for fluffy centers and crisp shells. Waxy types are strong for tidy pieces. All-purpose potatoes sit in the middle when you want one bag to cover many plans. Keeping that simple map in your head prevents most potato disappointments before they happen. When you're unsure, one reliable habit makes every method easier. Testing doneness with a tool that tells the truth. Testing potato doneness with a thin skewer or the tip of a small knife is often more accurate than using a thick fork because it reveals resistance in the center instead of forcing through it. A fork can disguise a firm core, especially when the outside has already softened, and that can lead you to stop too early. A thin tester slides easily only when the inside has softened fully, so it helps you drain at the right moment or leave a baked potato in the oven just long enough. The practical consequence is consistency. You stop cooking when the texture is right, which makes every later step easier, whether you are roasting, mashing, or turning leftovers into something new. It also keeps you from overcooking in an attempt to make sure, because overcooking creates its own problems, from falling apart cubes to waterlogged mash. With these small habits in place, the potato becomes less of a guess and more of a steady, repeatable ingredient. As you let these facts settle, the potato can return to being what it has always been at its best: calm, flexible, and easy to work with, changing shape and texture in predictable ways when you ask it to, and staying simple when you don't. May you sleep deeply tonight and wake tomorrow feeling rested and steady.